All right, Dr. Jason Johnson is a professor of political science. He's a well-known commentator in America, and he has been racing around all day, and he's fit us in just for a few minutes, and I appreciate it, Jason. You just came from a COVID-19 test.
Yeah. It was a very interesting experience in sort of public health and government administration. It was at a local, pharmacy that we have here in the States called Walgreens. And you had to set up an appointment, you go in, you kind of administer on your own, but it's sort of
I won't ask you the details because it's personal, but what a runaway train in America. And we all look at it from Europe. Britain, where I am, has had one of the worst outbreaks next to Brazil, next to America. We had 57,000 deaths around that. You guys are approaching 200,000.
Well, yeah. And the reason why is because Bolsonaro and Boris Johnson and Donald Trump are cut from the same cloth. Boris Johnson almost died from COVID-19 and still hasn't recognized the importance of sort of general public health. His attacks on NHS since he got into office have contributed to one of the difficulties that you all are having in managing it. But the United States is an absolute mess. It is an abattoir of death. We're going to have over 200,000 people dead from COVID, not to mention the people who are living with the long-term health consequences by the time Donald Trump has his first debate with Joe Biden. So it has been an absolute mess. We are the world's dirty cousin at this point.
What becomes the main election issue if he's hammering out law and order. Surely COVID-19 and the number of deaths and the healthcare crisis you have there must rank up against that and probably is above that.
Dan, I think what's important for everybody abroad to understand is that there is a disconnect, an extreme disconnect between what you may see in 24-hour news coverage and what is actually affecting regular people and voters. Now, everyone can always say that. It's always pretentious to say they're missing the man on the street, they're missing the guy in the pub. But I'm telling you this because it is true. The most important story is not the polls. The polls are consistent. Donald Trump is losing. Donald Trump has been losing. It doesn't really matter. He's acting like someone who's already lost. The biggest issue has been that he's cheating. That the President of the United States and the Republican Party have already said that national security agencies can no longer brief Congress on election interference. He has put one of his cronies and appointees in charge of the post office. It's hundreds of thousands, millions of Americans are going to vote by the post office this year. Shutting down post offices and destroying sorting machines is basically a way of gumming up the works. That is the problem. Donald Trump has already lost. He knows he's going to lose to Joe Biden. All he's doing now is trying to consolidate power. Any discussion in America, I scream this on TV and in writing, any discussion in America that pretends that this is actually still an election between two competing sides is ignoring the obvious dangers that Donald Trump poses to basic democracy.
So what are the demographics then? In terms of Black America,
Mm-hmm.
Surely if they can vote, they will not vote for Donald Trump. If they can get to the polls, if they can navigate a pandemic, if they can deal with this mail-in ballot problem.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, look, demographically, if you look at the United States of America, the Republican Party for 15, 20 years now, it's only a white people's party. They only function because they have almost a lock on white voters. And if you look at it, there hasn't been a Republican who actually won the majority of votes in America since, in 2000. I think the last time a Republican actually won the majority of the vote, it was 2004 when Bush ran for re-election. Every other election since, they've lost. They have not gotten the majority of the vote. So they're not reflective of what people want. So demographically, while they may have the majority of the white vote, Democrats usually get anywhere between 38 to 42% of the white vote, 90-something percent of the African-American vote. Trump has been oddly competitive with the Hispanic vote in America, but you have to remember the Hispanics it's a hodgepodge term. There are white Hispanics in America who identify with white supremacy and racism and abuse that the president sort of engages in. So, it is a last desperate attempt for a certain kind of entrenched bigotry in America to maintain power, because demographically, they lost this country 20 years ago.
We were rocked by this Atlantic article. At least, I was rocked because I've spent a lot of time with the U.S. military, embedded with them. I understand how they would react to it, where he talked about worrying about his hair and not going to a cemetery in France and calling war vets losers. And it's just not the Atlantic, but it's been, you know, 5 other news organizations have come out now and quoted the same source. And I think we can all guess probably who the sources are, who the source is. But does that stick to him, or in this frenetic, ferocious news cycle, is that just forgotten about the next day?
No, it doesn't stick. And here's why.
It doesn't.
The cleavage in America, it's not between Republicans and Democrats. It's not even between conservatives and liberals. It's between people who pay attention to politics and people who don't. The people who pay attention to politics already know how they feel, and they look for they look for confirming information, and they don't want to deal with cognitive dissonance. So there's a lot of people in America who haven't even heard of the Atlantic story. They don't care. Now the military has heard about it, and Trump is doing very poorly with the military for an incumbent president who happens to be a Republican. But you know what? He had already been doing poorly with the military. He was already at a low approval rate with the military. Most of the information that we're hearing about now is simply allowing people to be more comfortable in the decisions that they're already making. There's not one person in America who heard that Donald Trump called soldiers losers and didn't want to go visit a gravesite in France and change their mind from Biden to Trump. Nobody did, because everybody knew that this was Donald Trump's personality beforehand. He attacked John McCain. He called John McCain a loser for being a POW for 5 years in Vietnam. Who's going to be surprised by this?
So tell me about the race relations in America. Will they play a very big role in the election?
Oh, they always do, because this is a pretty racist country, and anyone who pays any attention knows it's a racist country. Just like the UK, just like Brazil, just like any country that's dominated by people who colonized and killed the indigenous population. The only difference this time is that Donald Trump has done the one thing that you can't do in America and still get legitimately elected. Because again, he may stay in power, but it's only going to be because he cheats like a third world country dictator. Donald Trump has angered white people in America. There's a lot of white voters in America. They don't care about racism. They don't care about corruption. They don't care about, misogyny or anything else like that in the White House. But COVID-19 has wrecked our economy, and COVID-19 has disrupted the way of life that most people are used to. We can't go to the movies. Kids are trapped at home trying to learn online. The grocery store lines can sometimes be all the way around the corner, depending on what COVID precautions your schools have. So from a racial standpoint, Trump has alienated white voters in a way that most people have. African Americans, or if you're talking about these sort of protests in general, let's be clear. State-sponsored violence against Black people in America is not new. We have merely been able to pay more attention to it over the last 15 years because of technology and because everybody is sheltered in place. Now everybody sees the violence. If you notice, the support for Black Lives Matter with white voters went from a peak of 63%. Now it's down to about 49 or 47. Some less than sophisticated American analysts would say, oh my gosh, the Black Lives Matter thing, it's working against people now. Biden needs it. No, 63% of Americans don't care that much about how Black people live. Let's be honest about the history of this country. It's about 50% think that Black Lives Matter is fine. The rest are fairly ambivalent about it. And there's not anybody in this country who sees protests in Portland and sees protests in Kenosha and suddenly changes their mind. How people are going to vote was already baked into the cake. And I'll close with this because I think this is really key. There's an activist in the United States who's very active on Twitter. Her name is Bree Newsom. And Bree Newsom is the woman who climbed to the top of the flagpole in South Carolina and tore down the Confederate flag after a white nationalist, Dylan Roof, massacred 9 people in a church after praying with them, killed 9 Black people in a church 5 years ago.
Yeah, horrible.
And she has this great tweet where she says, as a white person, these responses to Black Lives Matter are kind of like some white person saying, you know what? I was against slavery, and then I heard some slaves burn down a cotton field. Look, either you're against slavery or if you weren't. Okay, if burning down a cotton field or a slave revolt changes your mind, then you were never really against slavery. If protests in 2 American cities, when the vast majority of American cities have seen nothing like this, if that's enough to change your mind, you were never in favor of Black Lives Matter. You were always going to vote for Trump. So race relations in America are pretty much what they've always been. It's just now they're public and people are much more concentrated in what their pre-existing opinions already were.
I'm nodding my head, but I'm trying to process it because I would think after George Floyd and some of these terrible killings in video now that sets the street on fire and can be seen from from the East Coast to the West Coast so quickly that surely people now understand the level of brutality, and they understand the police abuse, and they understand how some 80,000 police departments, 85,000 police departments in America, don't hire properly, don't train. And in the end, most of these guys walk on criminal charges. And surely the level of awareness and the amount of people who are disturbed, not just in the Black community, obviously, but in the white community, surely that's changed.
No, I mean, look, here's the thing, Dana. People always knew. It's like when you have a steroid scandal, right? In a popular sport, whether it's Lance Armstrong or tennis or football or basketball, and it's a steroid scandal, and people are like, oh my gosh, and then there's a big discussion for weeks. We need to talk about steroids in high school and college sports. Everybody already knew it was there. It's just occasionally it gets thrown in your face in a way that you can't avoid. Everyone in America, white people, have always known that the police are more brutal and more violent with non-white people than with white people, regardless of the color of the police officer. Everybody's already known that. There's not one person in America who didn't know that. They may have not known how extreme it was. They may have not known data behind it, but they knew it. All that happened with George Floyd is that a bunch of people who were trapped at home, who were already frustrated, saw a murder. I mean, they saw a murder. And people don't like seeing murder because it forces them to confront the thing that they always knew was going on. But do I think it's transformed anyone? No, I think what it's done is made people who were ambivalent about the issue more clear that it's a problem. And it may have raised it from being here on the list of important things to here for some white people. But there's nobody who saw George Floyd as like, my God, I had no idea police brutality was an issue until I saw them kill this Black man in 8 minutes. Anyone who says that was the case with them, they're lying. I mean, you was a Stephen Lawrence. Stephen Lawrence was 2007, right, in the UK?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the riots that ensued after that.
Yeah. Like, is there anybody who didn't know how the cops treated people? I lived in Brixton. I've lived in Manor House. I know how the cops treat people, and I was an American. So, like, it's not like people don't know. It's a matter of how important they take the knowledge that they already have and how it applies to how they behave politically.
Is Biden going to get elected, and is the promise of a Biden victory going to change anything when it comes to race relations and policing?
I have no idea if Joe Biden is going to end up being president of the United States. That is the honest to goodness answer. He will very likely win the popular vote. He may actually win the election, but whether or not he ever becomes president of the United States, I don't know. Because we are dealing with an unprecedented administration that has made it abundantly clear that they will break every law, every norm, and every rule in the book in order to stay in office. What you're looking at right now is extremely important, and it's no different than it's not even just Brexit. It's when the Scottish sort of independence happened, which basically broke the Labour Party, right? Which is now going to allow the Tories and the Conservatives pretty much stay in power forever until something changes up there with the SNP, I think it is. What we're looking at right now,
but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what we're looking at right now is 60 days from the end of what's left of American democracy. If Donald Trump is not removed from office, we will not have another free and open election for 30 years because he's cheated. And everybody knows he's cheated. And if he gets away with cheating, and if he's able to stay in the White House, then we're not going to have any more elections here. They won't stop doing what they're doing. They'll get more bold. So will Joe Biden win? I think he'll win by any empirical measure. But whether or not he ever steps into the White House, I have no idea. There are too many factors at play. And I think anyone that says that they know is being naive and foolish.
Oh, Jason, you're really making me feel foolish because here I went overseas as a foreign correspondent to places like Russia and to cover things like elections in Russia and Belarus, thinking that would never come to America. And we were watching the spread of democracy after the fall of the Soviet Union. Now you're telling me I should have just crossed the Canadian border down to the US and done my foreign correspondent service there, and I'll watch it there when Trump refuses to accept the results of an election. Astounding.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what I more or less predict, and it's pretty much sort of my closing, but I'll tell you what I pretty much predict on this. We're not going to know on election night. We're not going to know who won the presidency on election night. And what's going to happen is the president of the United States is going to declare himself the victor, no matter what the numbers are. He's going to say he's won. And then it's going to be up to the three main television networks as to whether or not they will broadcast the president claiming that he won. Then you're going to have states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Arizona, maybe even Pennsylvania are going to be saying, hold on. We have so many mail-in ballots. We have to take more time to count. And as those counts come in, most of those states, if they were purple, are either going to get more blue or they may vacillate back and forth. Trump is going to tell people to stop voting. These neo-Nazi Proud Boy groups are going to start attacking electors. You're going to have the National Guard brought in. And all of that is going to be taking place in a situation where we know hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of ballots may never have even been delivered to the people who needed them to vote. And our Supreme Court said during a primary earlier this year that if your ballot doesn't arrive on election day, even if it's postmark in time, they say that under some circumstances you can throw it out. So we will have no idea who the president is, and there will be armed conflict in the streets with white nationalists going to main voting areas in order to attempt to intimidate people or prevent people from counting ballots. That is what's going to happen on election night. How long it lasts, I have no idea.
My head is spinning. Dr. Jason Johnson, thank you so much for your insight. And as disturbing as it may be, it's enlightening, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much. Anytime.